Cuba is not a giant country, but its position in the Caribbean has made it strategically important for centuries. Sitting near the United States, the Gulf of Mexico, and major sea routes, Cuba has long attracted outside attention. This is the story of Cuba's history, its economic value, and why Washington has sought influence there. Cuba lies at a maritime crossroads between the Caribbean Sea, the Atlantic, and the entrance to the Gulf. That location gives it outsized importance in shipping, naval strategy, migration, and regional power politics. Even before modern empires, Cuba mattered because it sat on valuable Caribbean routes and fertile island territory. Under Spanish rule, Cuba became one of the Crown's most prized colonies in the Americas. Havana grew into a fortified port where fleets, merchants, and imperial power all converged. Sugar and tobacco made Cuba rich, and that wealth tied the island tightly to global trade. Any great power that influenced Cuba could shape access to nearby waters and commerce. By the 19th century, Cuba was both economically valuable and politically unstable under Spanish rule. The Spanish-American War in 1898 changed everything and pushed Cuba into America's strategic orbit. Cuba became formally independent, but its sovereignty was heavily constrained by U.S. power. The Platt Amendment let Washington intervene and gave it extraordinary leverage over Cuban affairs. Guantanamo Bay added a permanent U.S. military foothold with strategic value in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, Cuba's economy became deeply tied to sugar exports and U.S. investment. Havana boomed with tourism and nightlife, but inequality and corruption fueled deep resentment. That resentment helped create the conditions for revolution and the fall of Batista's regime. In 1959, Fidel Castro's revolution transformed Cuba and shattered the old U.S.-backed order. Nationalizations and Cold War rivalry quickly turned Cuba from neighbor into bitter adversary. The 1962 missile crisis made Cuba a flashpoint in the most dangerous nuclear standoff of the age. For Washington, the shock was simple. A hostile Soviet-aligned state sat just 90 miles from Florida. Cuba's economy then shifted through Soviet support, state planning, and dependence on outside partners. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Cuba entered severe crisis with shortages, blackouts, and painful adjustment. Today, Cuba still matters economically through tourism, remittances, nickel, tobacco, and services. The United States still watches Cuba closely because of migration, security, sanctions, and regional influence. But this is not really about owning Cuba. It is about limiting rivals and shaping outcomes nearby. American officials also worry about rival powers gaining intelligence, military, or political footholds near U.S. shores. Cuba itself remains under Cuban state control, even while outside powers try to pressure or influence it. That is Cuba's enduring story, a strategically placed island whose geography made it valuable and contested.